Welcome to the third stage of our craft and deliver process. And this is the last stage of our crafting process as well, which is make it interesting. Before we get into the make it interesting module, I have something to talk about. Back when I was a new trainer almost 11 years ago, I used to travel across Tamil Nadu and Kerala to a lot of engineering colleges, helping them train on employability skills, majorly communication, so that they can speak up in their interviews and do well, etc. At that point, when I used to train, I realized that I did not just enjoy talking about and teaching information. I just did not enjoy that. Instead, what I really liked was sharing my experiences or talking about the way I worked on my public speaking fear or mistakes that I made, and then talking about those with the students that actually helped them connect with me better. They realized that, okay, there is so much, and I really need to listen and I need to work on myself so that I can get a job and do well in my job. So it changed their perspective and their mindset so much. When I moved on to becoming a corporate trainer and I was working full time in an organization, I realized that the people whom I connected with in my sessions, they came in with a lot of experience, life, work experience, and it was just amazing to have conversations with them. And that's when I used more interaction. I started asking more questions. I got to talk to them, have conversations, listen to what they had to say, and that was amazing. Some of the best sessions that I had were sessions that just started with a single question, and then conversation grew and everyone left the session feeling that they had learned so much, they had taken so many new things, and truly they were some amazing sessions for me as well. So why am I telling you all this? I just wanted to share a brief about how I learned to make my speeches interesting, and those are the exact things that I'm sharing with you in this video. So what exactly do I mean by make it interesting is connecting with your audience so that they are ready, they are engaged, they want to listen to what you have to say, and not only listen but they also retain, they learn, and then they take away something that you want them to take away, and ultimately they are influenced and you are able to create that impact that you want with your audience. That is audience connect, and that is why we focus on making our content interesting for our audience. Through my story and through the example that I shared with you, I hope you understand why it is important to connect with our audience. Having an engaged audience, having an audience which is interactive, they are sharing information, makes them more positive, they are more likely to listen to you, they get inspired by whatever you are sharing with them, they are more attentive, and therefore they are easily influenced, and which is the name of the game when we are trying to create impact. I hope you've understood what is Audience Connect and why it is important and how is it going to make your speech more impactful as well. So let's talk about how can we do this. So there are three main techniques that I'm going to talk about. Now there's actually a lot of different techniques, but I'm going to focus on three main ones, and I have seen that even doing one of this can make a major difference in the way that you speak. It helps you create your own speaking style. It actually helps you figure out a style of speaking that you enjoy, and it makes speaking more fun for you, a more enjoyable process, and you would love doing it as well. So it's great way to identify your style of speaking. So the three techniques that we're going to talk about are storytelling, questioning, and listening. Let's look at them each in detail, and there are other techniques at the end that I'm also sharing, which you can also try and use. In this particular video, we are going to talk about storytelling and questioning. Let's begin with storytelling. Now, I started this particular video with a story of how I used stories and I use questions to make my sessions interesting and therefore impactful, not only for me but for the audience. And that is an example of how you can do the same as well in your speeches. Stories are amazing. People love listening to stories. Right from kids to adults, we enjoy stories. And when we actually get information through stories, we retain them better. And therefore, I would love if you could try and implement storytelling in your own speeches as well. So let's first take a look at what can good stories really do. Good stories can make your audience imagine that they are in the story and visualize the entire thing happening, and that makes them completely engaged to your story. It can evoke emotions, happiness, sadness, joy, anger, all of those emotions they might feel as you're taking them through a story. It gets them completely involved and they want to know what is going to happen next in the story. It helps them shape their minds in the way that you want them to, helps them retain the information that you are trying to share through your story, and thereby create a connection. Because once we've heard a story that we really like from somebody, we remember them, and thereby you have created a connection. So what are those good stories? Good stories are the ones that are personal. Now stories can be your own stories, your personal stories, stories that you have created maybe from some incidents of your life, other stories that maybe you have picked up, inspirational stories of other people you can also share. But as when your stories are personal, they make a world of a difference. Those stories are relatable, that people who are listening to them are able to relate to everything that is happening in the story. It is engaging. There's so many amazing things that are happening in the story that they are completely engaged. It is structured well. A story that is jumping from one to the other, oh I forgot this, doesn't really help. So well structured stories, stories that resonate with your audience and thereby inspire and motivate them, these are the kind of stories that you want to use. Now you can pick any story and you can use the story anywhere you want. You can use them in the introduction, you can use them in the conclusion, you can use them in the body of your speech, you can use them wherever you want. But when you use the story, it is important that you follow the right structure. So let's look at a structure for your story, and this is a standard structure that you can follow for any kind of story. Now there are a lot of different methods of storytelling as well, different story models that you can experiment with, but keeping in mind our three-part structure, here is a simple structure that you can use for any story. It starts with the context. Like when I told you I was a trainer 10 years ago, I used to travel a lot to these colleges, so setting the context can always help. Then we talk about the conflict, that I did not like just sharing information just like that or teaching. So what is it that I did? I decided to share my stories and my experiences, and then that helped me create better connection. It had made my audience more engaged, and that is why I can end with a conclusion that says why storytelling is amazing for a trainer or for a coach. Now that can become a topic in itself. So now this is a standard story structure that you can use for all your stories. Set the context, give the background, introduce the characters, talk about the conflict or the problem that they have, and then what was the conclusion. Simple as that. I hope that this entire piece sparks that interest in you to tell more stories. Storytelling doesn't have to be complicated. People end up thinking, oh, it has to be like that, it has to make a huge difference, it has to be so complex. It is not. Storytelling can be extremely simple, and it can be a great way to connect with your audience. Do give this a try, and when you do let me know. I would love to know how that goes. Sharing stories is just great. I would love for you to share more of your stories. The next technique that we are going to talk about is questioning. Now I did talk about how I use questioning as a trainer, but now we're going to understand how questioning can actually increase the level of engagement and interaction in your speech with your audience and thereby create impact. What do I mean by questioning is not constantly asking your audience a series of questions like an interviewer, and that doesn't really help anyone. People are going to get turned off. What do I mean by that is asking certain questions that make your audience think, get them to share information, get them to engage a little, and that can really help you increase the connection with your audience. So what can questions do? Questions can help engage. They can help your audience to reflect and think about what is it that you have asked them. They can help your audience share certain information that you need so that you can keep moving ahead. They can make them think a little differently. They get your audience to interact. They get them to imagine different situations, and this automatically helps them retain more information because they shared inputs for you and therefore learn easily. So now that we know how amazing questions can be and how it can completely change the way you are interacting with your audience, let's look at how we can use the different types of question in different contexts. So starting with our open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are questions that generate answers which are filled with information. So when I ask you an open-ended question like what is your name, where are you from, what do you think, what is your opinion, when did you do this, this always gives me answers in terms of information. information. So open-ended questions will get me information, whereas close-ended questions will get me mostly a yes or no or a one-word answer. Have you completed this? Did you finish this job? Would you do this? Would you like this? So when I ask these questions, it's usually a yes or a no, which means close-ended answers. And then reflective kind of questions are just kind of questions that make people think a little deeper. Let's say you've already asked a question and then you say, why is that so? Why do you think that is the case? How does this affect you? So it actually pushes the audience to reflect and think a little deeper, and those are your reflective questions. Now that we know the three types of questions, you want to use them effectively in your speech. Now, if you start your speech by asking too many open-ended questions, then that's a lot of information, and sometimes your audience is not ready to share that. So a better way to do this is by start with close-ended question, get your audience warmed up to answering questions, and then you can ask them other open-ended questions. Use questions wherever required in your introduction, in your body, in your conclusion, where it's going to add that level of interaction and it's going to help you get some answers that you can build your speech on. And it is also a great way of getting your audience to stay engaged and interact. So now we know where to use what type of questions. Let's look at a few tips that you need to remember when it comes to asking questions. Firstly, it is important that you frame your question correctly. An incorrectly framed question or an extremely long question that is so complex that people can't understand means that your audience is not going to answer. They're just going to be looking at you blank and confused. And this either ends up with you repeating the question multiple times or answering your own question, which is never a good thing to do. So do not complicate your question. If you ask a complicated question, you're not going to get an answer. Instead, ask simple questions and get better answers. If it is too complicated, your audience is just trying to process and they never will answer, which means it's better if you start with simple questions. Start with close-ended questions, get them warmed up. The next point is very, very important. Preempting answers to questions means that you already think about all the different answers that people are going to say before you even ask the question. This ensures that you are not taken aback when someone gives a very vague or weird answer. Trust me, as a speaker, it is important to know what are the answers you're going to get so that you can move on to the next part of your speech easily and not get stuck because of an answer that you did not think someone was going to share. Basically, you need to be prepared for any answer that you get if you ask a question. So preempt answers before you ask the question so that you are in a safer spot. If you need a very specific answer, then ensure that you ask a very specific question. Create the question based on the answer that you are looking for. You can't ask a vague question and expect a specific answer. You can't ask a general question and expect a specific answer. Therefore, if you're looking for a certain word, certain sentence, certain thing that you want the audience to say, then you have to ask a specific question. And finally, don't expect the audience to guess your answer. Now, let's say you asked a question and the audience is not probably giving you the right answer. Most often, speakers tend to then give the answer themselves, which is not a great idea. Instead, what you can do is you can always nudge them towards the correct answer. Now, ideally, this can be resolved if you had asked a correct question, a good question. However, if you still end up asking a question that is not getting you the right answer, then nudging and moving them closer to the correct answer is better than hoping that they will guess it for you. I hope that all these tips and all these techniques are going to help you start by asking at least maybe one question to your audience to get that interaction flowing. I have used questioning in so many sessions, and sometimes even just entire sessions were built on questions, and it can actually be extremely impactful and can have an amazing takeaway as well. So do try questioning as an audience connect method and you will see a huge difference. Now, how exactly is listening an audience connect technique? Whether you are sharing a story or you are interacting with your audience, an important aspect of being a speaker is also being a good listener, a listener who looks at the audience, who listens to what they have to say and maybe what they are not saying as well, so that you can ensure that you are still on track to create impact with them. Let's look at a little bit more about listening. So why should you listen to your audience? You need to listen listen because you want to know if they actually understand what is it that you're trying to tell them. And you would not know it if you don't actually listen to them, pay attention to them. Listening will also help you know if they are paying attention to you and therefore are listening to what you have to say. You will also be able to know if they have questions and they are not sure of something, maybe. Think about the time when you were in the audience and you wanted to ask a speaker a question, but you did not want to because you thought maybe you will disturb the speaker, or you were not sure if you should ask the question or not. Now, your audience might be feeling the same way. If you are paying attention, if you are listening closely, you will be able to identify if anyone looks confused or if they need help in any way. You will also be able to know if something is troubling them. Maybe they are not able to just follow your train of thought, and that will help you get clarity and therefore ensure that they also get clarity. You will be able to know if they need help, and you'll be able to create a connect when you listen, when you pay attention, and it will also help you to avoid being out of context. What if your audience is just not able to get what you're saying? So it is important that you pay attention, you listen to them, so that you will be able to identify if you need to get back on track, if you're going off track, etc., so on and so forth. So what does listening actually involve? It means knowing your audience very well. Everyone who is sitting there or who is listening to you, who's watching you, knowing your audience, focusing on them, eye contact, getting to actually see their expressions, paying attention to the things that they're saying, the things that they're not saying. Are they interactive? Do they look engaged? Do they look interested? Looking for all these nuances, paying attention to their emotions, that will help you create that connect, and therefore this is what is listening. It is not just listening when you ask a question, but it is listening even if you have not. Even while you're speaking, paying attention to your audience, observing your audience will tell you a lot that you need to know as a speaker, and therefore help you ensure that you're going to create impact. Therefore, listening is a key skill that any speaker needs to develop if they are looking to become impactful in their speeches. Now, let's look at some more techniques that you can also try to increase the engagement and therefore make it interesting for your audience. Let's take a look at them. So, one of the first techniques is by bringing in facts. So, facts that bring in credibility to the information that you're providing will make a good difference, and it will also make your content extremely interesting. For example, when I say that 75% of people have a fear of public speaking, that automatically makes people interested and they think, oh, it's not just me. There's a lot more people out there. And that changes the way they look at public speaking. The next one is numbers or stats. Whenever it is work related presentation and you have numbers to quantify and showcase impact and bring about a difference, definitely go ahead and use them in the right manner and approach, and that will make your audience think a little differently and definitely pay more attention to those numbers that you're sharing with them. Quotes are also an amazing way to add a bit of interaction to your speeches. People remember things said by others, and you can use them verbatim, not paraphrased, in your speech to get that connection and get them to relate to whatever it is that you are saying. The next way is by giving a lot of examples. When you're talking about something complex, you can always make that easy for your audience to understand through an example. And I have been sharing examples throughout this entire course, and I hope that that has been helping you. The same way, you can also use examples wherever required if you want to add that additional element of clarity. Analogies are also great ways of taking complex aspects and explaining them in a simple method through the use of an analogy. For example, when I talk about how we learn driving as a skill and then connect it to how you can also improve your speaking in a similar manner, that becomes a great analogy. And this is something that you can try for all your complex processes, methods, and techniques. The next one is jokes. If you have seen stand-up comedy or if you watched comedians, you would know that all their jokes have been practiced thousands of times before they actually go ahead and say it out there. They rehearse a joke multiple times, and only when they are absolutely sure they're going to get a laugh, they're going to use it. You need to do this as well. Try and test your joke multiple times, and once you are with a winner, then you want to keep that close. And jokes are amazing when you want to inject humor into your speeches and connect with your audience in a different way as well. I have used jokes, but they are all jokes that I have tried out multiple times, and I know they're definitely going to make people laugh when they listen to them. Definitely try and practice your jokes beforehand, because when a joke falls flat, it doesn't look good for you. So definitely practice your joke and know that it'll get a laugh or two. The next technique that you can use is by making an observation. By making an observation, a broad observation or a random observation of certain things, you can then get people to think differently and then connect it to your topic of choice. The next one is by picking up a recent event, something that is happening in the world around you, and then connecting it to your topic is also a great way of getting that interaction and engagement happening. Visuals are also a great way to make your speech more interesting. For example, you can use presentations or decks, you can use props, and all of things will definitely engage your audience more, because not everyone learns by just listening, or not everyone takes in information by just listening. Some people like to watch as well, some people like a visual element, and this will help them greatly. When you are talking to adults, you should also remember that they come in with vast experience. They have a lot of experience in their lives, and it is always great to connect your speech in some way to that experience that they already have, and that would also make them completely engaged and therefore create impact. And the last one is by setting a scene, helping them visualize it, take them on a journey, and that will transport them and obviously keep them engaged. These are all amazing techniques that you can try to make your speech more interesting, to create that connection with your audience, and thereby create impact. So now that we've discussed all the techniques, let me share a few tips for you. First thing is to experiment with all these techniques. Give them all a try. Try one at a time and see what resonates more with you and what is working really well for you. Now, after working with so many people over the years, I've realized that people start taking up one technique or a couple of techniques and making it their own style, and they start enjoying the process of speaking more. So you can also build your own speaking style once you try out a lot of these different techniques. Connect with your audience in some way, form, or the other, and that is what is important. It does not have to be how many techniques you're using or how amazing this particular technique is, but in any way that you're able to create that connection with your audience, it's important. And another last piece is engage and then listen. Listening is key when it comes to connecting with your audience. We spoke about the concept of less is more when we discussed structures, but make it interesting is the concept of less but better. What I also mean by this is sometimes you might not need three different things to talk about a topic. If you could replace that entire thing, maybe with a story, maybe with an analogy, maybe with an example. So think about how you can replace speaking one-sided speech with an audience connect technique and make it amazing. So less but better, less but more interesting, and less but more impactful. And that is what I want you to take away from this particular section. Saying less but better, making it more interesting. And with that, we are done with the first three stages of our craft and deliver process. In the next video, we are going to look at the three stages of delivery, and I will see you there.